The Mini 3 and 3 Pro are excellent drones, both for video and photography. In the video I will point out some common mistakes to avoid and some best practices to be aware of when starting to use these models, in order to avoid unnecessary risks or to get better results with your footage and photos. This is one of the main differences between the two models, as the Mini 3 doesn't have any obstacle detection sensors. Therefore, a lot of care is needed when flying. Always maintain a reasonable distance from obstacles and avoid very low flying. The Mini 3 Pro has a three-dimensional obstacle avoidance system with sensors at the front, the back and the bottom. It is possible to turn it on in the settings and to choose whether the aircraft should stop when encountering an obstacle or if it should try to find its way around it. I use the obstacle avoidance system a lot. It gives me a good amount of peace of mind and has saved my drone from crashing on countless occasions. But still, some care is needed when flying, as the system is not omnidirectional. The Pro model lacks sensors at the sides and at the top, therefore is not protected when flying sideways or upward. I would not suggest using it for close distance tracking, unless in an area totally free from obstacles. When circling or tracking, it is strongly suggested to maintain the aircraft above all obstacles and maybe use the zoom function to get closer to the action. The obstacle sensor of the Mini 3 Pro works remarkably well, but cannot be fully trusted with wiry obstacles like bare branches and cables. Also, remember that the obstacle sensors are not active when flying in sport mode. Even though the Mini 3 and 3 Pro are more powerful and have better aerodynamics compared to the Mini 2, they are still lightweight models below the important threshold of 250 grams. They cannot have the same wind resistance as bigger models like the Air 2S or the Mavic 3. Always check the wind conditions before flying. In case of medium to strong wind, if you decide to take your chance, always start your session by flying into the wind. If you notice that the drone can only advance very slowly, you will still be able to return to the home point and land. But if you start flying with a strong tailwind, the aircraft will quickly fly very far, and you might be unable to bring it back home. When trying to bring the aircraft back into a strong wind, it helps to lower the altitude and fly closer to the ground, where the wind is not as strong. Many users wrongly believe that when hitting the Return to Home button, the aircraft will return to the position of the remote controller, but it is not always the case. The Return to Home point is set after the connection of the drone to the different satellites. It is generally quite close to the position of the operator, unless the drone started flying before the home point was set. But if the operator is moving during the flight, for example on a car, a boat, a bicycle, or if he is trekking, in case of return home, the aircraft will head towards the home point set at the initial position, which might be very far from where the operator currently is. It can even be in the opposite direction. This might be dangerous, especially if there is little battery life left. In the settings, it is possible to update the return home point to the position of the controller. It is recommended to do so when the operator is moving, while the drone is flying. In the safety tab of the settings, it is possible to choose the auto return to home altitude. In case of a return to home, the aircraft will rise to that altitude before flying in the direction of the home point. Once the point is reached, it will start descending. It is important to set the altitude above all the surrounding obstacles, but not too high, as it will take time to ascend and then lower the altitude for landing, and this can be dangerous when battery time is short. After charging a battery, the full level is kept only for a couple of days. After that, the charge goes down to about half, in order to preserve the life of the battery. So, when taking off, it is better to check immediately the battery level instead of assuming that it is full charged, to avoid bad surprises. Running out of battery is one of the most frequent causes of drone crashes. The Mini 3 and 3 Pro, like most other drones, are not waterproof. They can stand a tiny bit of rain for a couple of minutes, but that is about it. They don't like at all salty water, especially the battery, so it is very important to avoid splashes from sea waves. Also, the downward sensor doesn't work properly over reflective surfaces, so it cannot be trusted to prevent the drone from entering the water, and even the altitude shown on the screen is not always accurate. So, when flying over water, avoid being too close to the surface and carefully monitor the distance of the aircraft from the waves on the screen. When shooting video, beginners tend to use automatic exposure. There are many reasons why it is important to get used to manual exposure as soon as possible. When using automatic exposure, whenever there is a variation in luminosity in the scene, there will be a very noticeable progressive adjustment of the brightness in the resulting clip. This is one of the most obvious signs of amateur footage. These variations in luminosity are much more pronounced when filming in the central hour of a sunny day, which is carefully avoided by experienced users whenever possible. Other situations involving changes in the amount of light in the scene are when rotating the camera progressively towards the direction of the sun, or when tilting the gimbal up from a downward position to include the sky in the scene. There are several methods used by experienced users to avoid unpleasant shift of luminosity, and all of them involve planning the shots in advance. The first thing to do is to set the exposure to manual, which is Pro mode. When filming around sunset or sunrise or with the sun covered by clouds, the change in luminosity will be reduced to the point of not being an issue. Avoid turning the camera towards the direction of the sun during the same clip. When planning a shot tilting the camera up from the ground to a position including the sky, it is suggested to expose for the sky in order to avoid burning the highlights. It will be then possible to raise the shadows while editing if needed. Using auto white balance is also to be avoided when shooting footage, as it might lead to very bad shifting color when the luminosity changes. It also makes very hard to adjust the colors while editing. When flying indoors, the GPS signal doesn't work. The drone drifts much more than usual, and the sensitivity to the sticks of the remote control is lower. In most cases, there will also be plenty of obstacles all around. Flying indoors should be done only by experienced user, with a lot of attention and possibly using propeller guards. Another beginner mistake is to repeatedly modify the direction of the fly and the camera angle during a clip. For cinematic footage, much better results are obtained by planning the shot in advance and making a continuous, smooth move while maintaining the same direction, more or less like in quick shots or in master shots. The Pro model has the excellent intelligent flight modes, spotlight and point of interest, very useful tool to produce smooth cinematic moves. Beginners tend to shoot footage and photo only from a high elevation. It is in most cases interesting to film the same landmark from different heights and at varied distances. Low-flying footage can often be very cinematic, although more planning is involved to make sure of staying clear of obstacles. Click on this link to watch my beginner's guide to the Mini 3 and 3 Pro. And don't forget to hit the like button if you found this video interesting. Thank you.